Guys, this is Note Taking Guide 2.2. Today we're going to talk about risk that we take in investments. But before we even talk about that, I just want you to kind of think about the fact that there is risk in everything. So my first example here says, Kyle warned Andrew that Bella was way too hot to go to the prom with. Andrew asked Bella anyway. She said no. What was Andrew's risk that he took? Being told no. Yeah, he was risking being told no. What was his reward? No. He didn't get anything, did he? Like, you would think reward would be a positive thing. He didn't really get a reward that would be positive. Could you think of something, some kind of reward, or is there...
Like satisfying knowing like that he asked.
Yeah, I like that he at least took the chance and knew that he didn't wonder what was happening. So there was at least that kind of reward, right? That he took the chance and he did that. So what was his risk? It was asking her to the dance. What was his reward? Some of you could say nothing. Some of you could say low self-esteem, because honestly, after someone says no to you, you might actually get that. Now, low self-esteem is not a positive thing, right? But can you see that risk would have positive outcomes and it could also have negative outcomes, right? So in this case, maybe his was not positive. Okay, another example. Janita is a skateboarding champion. She is working to perfect the double blind rollover flip, a move that she's invented for her competition. She has entered a contest with a $5,000 first place prize. What is Janita's risk?
Losing or injury?
Yeah, losing, injury, any of those kinds of things, right? And what could be her reward? $5,000, or perfecting a stunt that's never been done before, right? There's lots of things that could happen. Again, we thought of the positive rewards, but could there also be negative rewards? Yeah, there could be. Maybe she does all that work and she takes third place, right? I mean, there can be positive and negative, and that's hard to think about, but that's what happens when we invest money. There's positive rewards and there's negative rewards. Positive rewards would be called profit. Negative rewards would be called loss, which is kind of where we're going today. But I want to talk with you guys about a whole bunch of different ways that we can invest our money and how much risk they take in order to invest it. So the least risky is at the top. The most risky is at the bottom. And again, I'm just going to talk about some of these and then we'll do some activities with them afterwards, okay? The first way and the least amount of risk to save your money is a savings account. Okay, does anybody know why that is the least risky? Yeah.
Because it's backed by like the government.
Yeah, it is FDIC insured. It's backed by the federal government, which means if your money's in that account, even if that bank or credit union goes under, if they go bankrupt, the federal government still will pay you that money. So it's insured. I like that. That's perfect. Anybody else have another reason why it is a not risky kind of thing to do?
Well, he wants to go to the bank every time they get money.
Yeah. Okay. The neat thing about a savings account, though, is you can go to the bank and get your money anytime you want to, right? And even if the bank's not open, do you still have access to your money?
Most of the time.
Through an ATM, right? So one of the things we look at in investments is whether or not we can get to our money quickly. That's called liquidity or liquid, whether or not something is liquid. So a savings account is fast access, which means it's not very risky. Okay? The bad things about savings accounts is that they pay very little interest. Does anybody have a savings account right now? Yeah, do you know the interest rate they're paying you on that?
0.03%.
0.03%. That is less than, well less than 0.5%.
100.
Yeah, it's a very tiny amount of money that they're paying you on interest. So although you're not risking your money because it's always there, they're not going to give you any benefit or reward for having your money there either. Does that make sense? Okay. A checking account works very similar in the amount of risk compared to reward. Your checking account money is always there. You have it FDIC insured. You can get to it anytime you want through a bank or a debit card or an ATM. And they don't pay you hardly any interest on it. It works the exact same way. Okay? As we keep going up the list, though, more risk is taken, which means more reward is given. So the next thing on the list is a certificate of deposit. Does anybody know what that is? It's most commonly called at the bank or credit union a CD, for certificate of deposit. Does anybody know what that is? No? Well, let's read what it is, and then I'll explain to you in my own words what it is. It's they're very safe and offer a greater return than on a savings account, but instant access carries a penalty. U.S. government bonds are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. You do not lose your principal. There is no chance of default. The return is greater than savings accounts or certificate of, oh, this one talks about bonds right here too. So I just read two of them, sorry. Certificates of deposits, let me explain to you what it is, okay? It's like a savings account, but they pay you about 3 to 4% interest on it. Why do they pay you so much more interest than a savings account? It's because you lock your money up for a certain amount of time. So if I want to do a certificate of deposit, they're going to say to me, do you want to have your money in a certificate of deposit for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? And then according to the number of years that you choose, the interest rate goes higher and higher and higher. So it's harder to get to your money because you're supposed to leave it in there for that time period. If you do want your money, though, you can go to the bank or credit union and get your money on the same day. But you will lose the interest that they were going to pay you on that. Usually not all of the interest, but a good chunk of it will be taken from you for not leaving your money in there for the amount of time you said you would. Does that make sense to everybody what the difference is? So I want to tell you guys a little story about Mrs. Clark, and this is my advice as a mother to you guys. When my children are born, all 4 of them, I went to the bank and I opened a CD for them. A CD for my children works a little bit different than a CD for an adult at the credit union that I go to. Because for my children in their CD, I can put more money in every single month. So I put $10 a month in since the day that my kids were born. And as my kids got older, they started putting money in themselves. Like when my son started his lawn mowing business or whatever, they started putting money in themselves. So my son is 18 years old now. And his CD has over $6,000 in it. How would that be to be 18 years old and have $6,000 to move out with? That's pretty cool, right? How did it start? With $10 a month. Before he started putting any money in at all, he was already around $3,000. So just by me putting $3,000 in a month, he had that money sitting there. It's guaranteed, just like a savings account is. So you don't have to worry about your money not being there. Mrs. Clark? No, she didn't. Yeah. Yep. All right, so no real risk. There are penalties involved if you take your money out early. But for the most part, a very safe way to earn 3 to 5% on your money. Okay? All right, so as we keep moving down, we're going into bonds. I like bonds. Bonds are a guaranteed amount of money usually. You don't usually lose money on bonds, but bonds are a little bit harder to get your money out of. Again, like the certificate of deposit, it takes a little bit extra time. My husband and I have some bonds, and in order to get our money out of the bonds, if we needed it for an emergency, it would take about 3 to 5 business days. Because our money is not locally at a bank or credit union, it's somewhere else. So it takes a few days to get to your money, but that's usually a higher interest rate paid on bonds than on certificates of deposits. The thing about bonds, again, though, is that you have to keep your money there for a certain amount of time, okay? Down here where it's talking about government bonds, it says the risk is low, but the return is relatively low also. But there's tax benefits to having bonds, which is kind of nice too. Okay, the bonds that we have pay between 7 and 9%. So that's way better than a savings account, right? And it's better than a CD. So if you want safe, bonds are a great way to do it. All right, if you keep going down, we get to mutual funds. Does anybody know what a mutual fund is? No? Nobody in here has any mutual funds?
It might if you tell me.
If I tell you what it is. Okay. So when you do a mutual fund, and maybe we should read this and then I'll explain the rest of it. But it says mutual funds are pools of cash, bonds, and or stocks, and provide a means of diversification. So normally when we play the stock market or put our money in the stock market, we would do that ourselves. I would have my $10,000. I would buy stock with it. When we do mutual funds, they would take my $10,000, your $10,000, his $15,000, their $100,000. They would put it together into one big pot, and they would play the stock market with bigger amounts of money, and they would diversify it more, meaning a bigger amount of places that they're putting the money. Which means you have maybe the chance of this company over here not doing well, but the other 7 companies do well. So you get the benefit of all those companies. Where if you were investing just on your own, you wouldn't have that ability to spread $10,000 over that like you could when you group together. Does that kind of make sense? So mutual funds are safer than the stock market, doing stocks, because you get to use the benefit of other people's funds while you're investing. Okay? Mutual funds have actually, in the history of mutual funds, never shown at the end of the year a loss. So, which is different than stocks also, because stocks are much more risky and volatile, meaning they change a lot. The stock market is run off of really what's happening in the government. So every time the president says something to a foreign country and makes them not want to trade with us, guess what the stock market does? It drops. So guess what your investments do? They drop. So you have to be very careful with the stock market or buying stocks, because you have a lot more risk with the companies that you would be placing your money on your own. So let's just take an example. Say you wanted to buy some stocks and you wanted to put your money in Apple for iPhones. Do you think that would be a really good choice to put your money? I saw a yes and I saw a no. Does anybody have any reason they want to say one way or the other?
Because Apple gets a lot of money.
Apple gets a ton of money. You're right. And their stock seems to be going up, right? So why could that be a bad reason then to put your money in them? Yeah.
The shares are more expensive, so you wouldn't have as much.
Yeah. You're paying more up front, for sure. You'd have less return on them because of that. And say the new iPhone comes out and they have a major programming problem in it, and they have to recall everything. What do you think is going to happen
I
then?
don't think they've ever done that. I don't think Apple's ever done that.
Yeah, I'm not sure Apple has either. But technology industries are the most high and low risk in like any given day. They can go up, they can go down, like really quickly, depending on whether or not someone likes what they produce. So you have to be really careful. There's kinds of stocks that are called utility stocks. Utility stocks are really normal, kind of lower risk stocks, because they're like oils and gasolines and those kinds of things that are always like kind of just at the same spot. So you can do things that will help. So today's just an overview of these things. We're going to do a little more explanation on these things as we go through. But even more risky than mutual funds or the stock market would be buying real estate. Can someone tell me why real estate would be more risky? Because it seems like it's a great place to put your money.
It doesn't have very much liquidity.
Yeah. So it's hard to earn a ton of money in real estate. Yeah, that's for sure. How about if you needed to sell and get your money? Does anybody know what the rules are on selling real estate? Even if I wanted to sell my real estate tomorrow when I went and got a realtor, do you know how many days minimum it would take me to do that? Roughly 30. Because I'd have to wait for the people's money to fund and for the title company to do their job and all of those kinds of things. So real estate is much more risky for a few reasons. One, the housing industry doesn't always do what you think it's going to. But secondly, because it's hard to get your money out of it immediately if you need it.